Fire is hot. Did you say hot? Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. It's not rocket science. It wasn't a trick question. Fire's hot. Right? Fire moves, it dances, flames move around up and down all over the place. And this represents, in human experience, in human life, it represents excitement, passion, involvement. And excitement, passion, involvement are never going to achieve anything in and of themselves. Right? And this is a really important lesson to remember. Something happens, whether it's something negative that we want to respond to, whether it's something positive that's inspiration and we get inspired. It's very important to remember that inspiration and passion don't achieve things. Lighting an enormous fire in the smithy isn't going to result in utensils coming out at the end of the day. But having a big hot fire will mean that the craftsman will be able to create those utensils. We have to make sure when we get inspired, when we're passionate, and even if it's not we're inspired and passionate, but when we are working on inspiring ourselves and awakening our passion, we don't just focus on inspiration and passion. It's very easy to get excited about inspiration and passion. But they themselves are not going to do anything. They're not going to get anything done. If, however, we connect them to processes, we say, okay, I'm inspired. Now let me make a commitment of something specific and tangible that I am going to do to channel this passion, to channel this excitement. Now this passion, this excitement, this inspiration are going to be able to be the driving force behind real change. And the reality in life is that oftentimes it can feel almost like a bit of a downer. It's like I'm super excited and passionate and I want to change the world and revolutionize the human experience and ... etc., etc., etc. And then it's like, okay, so how am I going to do this? Like, yeah, it would be cool if I would become president of the world today and just be able to do whatever I want. But that's not realistic. And then we stop and think, what is realistic? What can I actually do practically today to make a real change in the world? Generally, that's what it boils down to. Changing ourselves, changing our environments. And when we look at practically, for most of us, what we're able to realistically do, it doesn't look like something that's going to change the world today. And when we're inspired about changing the world, it's kind of like, oh, so what am I going to do? I'm going to dive in a little, focus a bit more on my prayer. I'm going to give a little bit more charity. I'm going to do another mitzvah. Yeah, that's going to change the world. And the answer is it will. And the reality is that that's what we can do. And some of us are in positions to do things that are more global and have larger collective effects. And that's fine and good, but the bottom line is for all of us, we have to stop and take that inspiration and figure out what can I practically really do to make the world a better place, then make a real, tangible, concrete commitment that will then be the process that this fire will drive, that this passion will drive, that the inspiration will drive, so that something will actually come out of it at the end of the day. And little things can make a big difference. We have no idea what the real outcomes of our actions are, what the magnitude of those outcomes are. And this is just a very specific example that doesn't quite illustrate the enormity of this, but there was a story of, I may not have all the details precisely accurate, but I think this is the story. There were a couple of, there's something called Merker Shlichus. Merker Shlichus is when in the summertime, when yeshivas are on break, so the older bachrim, the guys who were studying the older guys who were studying in yeshivas like 770, etc., go on what's called Merker Shlichus, which basically generally means traveling to regional places where Jewish resources for Torah Judaism are sparse, are hard to come by, and to go and visit people, look people up, try to talk to people, get people who don't really have exposure to Torah Judaism during the year, try to visit them, get them inspired, get them involved, help them out with resources as much as possible. So two guys come back to the Rabbi, and this is going back easy. Today anywhere you go, you whip out your phone, you look up Google, Facebook, you'll find a couple of Jews almost no matter where you are, and you can find them and you can visit them. Once upon a time, going back several decades, going back 40 years, 30 years, 50 years, guys would, hop on a train and travel for 2 days to somewhere and go to the post office and pull out like an actual phone book, if any of you have ever seen one, right? And look for the Jewish names and ask if anybody knows any Jews. It wasn't so simple. The reach that people had was much more limited than it is today. And so guys come back and they just spent a month traveling and literally didn't find a single Jew. These guys lived on crackers and sardines for a month, traveling in trains and staying in random places from one place to the next, and didn't find a single Jew. And they came back to the Rebbe really, really depressed. Really, really upset. And they were motivated. It's not that they weren't prepared to put in the work and to make the sacrifice, but they would have liked to at least meet one Jewish person and talk to them about something Jewish, but no one. And they come back to the Rebbe and they're telling the Rebbe about what happened and how upset they are. And the Rebbe opens a drawer and pulls out a letter that he had just received from a lady an older lady who lives in one of the towns that they'd been traveling through. And one day she had looked out the window and seen this most random thing she hadn't seen in decades. She sees these two young Jewish men with, their traditional clothing and their beards and their payas and their tzitzis hanging out. Walking down the street, excited to be doing what they were doing. She didn't know what they were doing there or what they were talking about, but they were clearly passionate about whatever it is that they were talking about. And it reminded her about her youth and about growing up in her parents' house and around her grandmother and the things that she had seen. And she started lighting Shabbos candles again because of the memories that were sparked when she saw these guys walking down the street out the window. Now that just changed. Just imagine what just happened for these two guys standing in this room. It just changed everything. Right? And this is one story where they happen to have been lucky to find out what happened. Just think about all the stories that we don't know about the outcomes of our actions. We have no idea when we walk down the street at any moment on any given time, just doing the things we're supposed to be doing, walking down the street the way that we're supposed to be walking down the street, interacting with people the way that we're supposed to be interacting, just being a mensch, just representing Torah Judaism the way that we're supposed to. We have no idea who's watching, who's seeing. And these are just the outcomes that we're not aware of within the physical reality in terms of things that happen in other people's experiences that we're not aware of. Let alone the things that happen spiritually that we're not aware of, that we have no way of ever being aware of, and things that may happen physically as a result. Not because someone saw us, but because our actions caused some sort of trickle effect that traveled through spiritual worlds and traveled back down and landed somewhere in a different time on the other side of the world and affected someone somewhere else and changed their life. We have no idea what our actions cause. So one little thing, one little tangible thing, putting one extra coin in the pushka, doing one extra favor, doing one extra mitzvah, learning an extra 60 seconds of Torah, squeezing it in somewhere in between two other obligations because we've decided we're going to try to stick in an extra 5 minutes of Torah study wherever we can during the day, whatever it is. It seems like a little thing, but nothing's little, and we have no idea what the magnitude is. So when we get inspired, when we have that fire, when we have that passion, wanting to change the world is a good thing. But just wanting to change the world doesn't change the world. Wanting doesn't do anything. Actions do things. Actions achieve. Desires don't achieve. Inspiration and passion don't achieve. If we channel that inspiration and passion into tangible commitments, those can achieve. Just like in the blacksmith, if there's no fire, you can be expert in every other part of the process. You're not going to have a process because there's no fire driving it. So while on one hand the fire itself doesn't actually generate results, the fire is the driving force behind the process that does generate results. And just for us practically, it's important to keep in mind whenever we do get inspired, take something realistic and tangible and tie the inspiration down to that by making some sort of commitment that's realistic and tangible.